The Guardian is structurally different to most newspapers because it does not belong to a corporation that is trying to make money. It belongs to a trust which does not want to make money. The only purpose of the trust is to keep the Guardian alive. And the trust has other businesses which make some money. It does not have to go to shareholders. There are no shareholders. The money from the other businesses comes into the centre to help the Guardian. And the worst single source of falsehood and distortion in our media is commercial pressure. It isn't about the owner telling journalists what to write. That's not the problem. It's about commercial pressure, which means that commercialised newsrooms that belong to corporations don't have the resources to do their job properly in the first place. And then they're very vulnerable to being manipulated by clever PR people or by propagandists. And so they publish stories which are full of falsehood and distortion. But we are somewhat protected from that commercial pressure. So we're a little bit more likely to go and do the long project, the big investigation, the special thing. I became a journalist because of the Watergate scandal, when these two men, armed just with notebooks and pens, brought down the most powerful politician in the world. So that was always my model of what journalism's about. I do think that the most important thing that journalists can do is to expose abuse of power in every area. And so I started to look at the media, because it's wrong that we say we will look at government and corporations and trade unions, but oh no, we won't look at media. That must be wrong. So we should look at ourselves. Well, so then if you look at why some journalists do dishonest things, it is not because, on the whole, it's not because they're morally weak and don't care. A lot of them are good people, but they work for bad organisations which are very hungry for profit. And so they become ruthless, and they put endless pressure on their journalists, bullying them. You have regimes of fear in some of those newsrooms. And so there's tremendous pressure on these people to go out and get the story, and don't come back into the office until you've got the story.
I read your book, and where come those editors that are bullying journalists? Where come from they are coming? From which schools? From which?
But they're coming up through the same route as everybody else, but they find themselves working in... It's the commercial side of the organisation which sets the tone. So if you have an owner that says, I own this newspaper in order to make a lot of money, then that message is passed down into the newsroom. We have to sell more newspapers to make more money for the owner. And in order to sell more newspapers, you have to get a story that somebody else hasn't got. So the whole operation becomes poisoned by ruthlessness. And breaking the law becomes part of that, breaking the rules becomes part of that, cheating your sources becomes part of it, fabricating stories which are more exciting than the truth. It derives from the commercial side.
And can we then conclude that in a way to do public service journalism, it's necessary to do it in a way in non-commercial, non-profit type of
No, I think it's not as black and white as that.
Okay.
So there are commercial news organisations which manage to do decent public interest journalism. But if you ask the question, why is The Guardian doing so much of it? The fact that it is relatively free of that commercial pressure is a central part of the answer. But that doesn't mean that there's no public interest journalism going on in the more commercialised papers.